Goosh.
Listen to Abe Thompson for an hour. I'd rather fuck a blood relative.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 142 of Abe Thompson and Other Disappointments. I am Abe Thompson. Pull up a chair, grab yourself a beer, refill that whiskey. Let's do this punk politics shit. I'm super psyched to be joined tonight by a chap that I first happened across on the social networking platform TikTok. I get a lot of shit doing the content that I do. For never having any balance, for always being too biased. People often comment or DM and say like, yeah, I mean, look, I can see that you're having fun and I can see there's a market for what you're doing, Aid, and I'm kind of enjoying the podcast, but it wouldn't hurt you from time to time to get somebody from the other side of the fence, all right? It's always fucking lefties. It's always progressives. Couldn't you just get somebody from the other side of the fence, Aid? Please, it would just be refreshing. And tonight, I am really happy to tell you, go fuck yourselves. It's my show. If you want balance, buy some fucking scales. I'm joined by young Pagoda this evening. Really psyched to have him on. I've been drawn to his videos a couple of times by friends in similar circles. It's your stuff is always like pretty humorous, kind of piss takey, but there's always a level of politics beneath it as well. Sometimes more overt than other times, but yeah, I'm really enjoying your stuff, man. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, mate. Fuck me, I thought that intro was going right the other way then. I thought this was a sting.
Yeah, well, this is, I'm a big fan of the comedy mechanics, lead them up the garden path and then boom.
I just get off on upsetting people, really. I think that's sort of my thing. But yeah, just living the 5'9" dream, really. Just aggravating people over 50 most of the time.
How long have you been doing TikTok stuff?
Probably about a year. It just sort of did all right, and to be honest, the majority of my sort of audience are Americans. I think they just see me as angry, sweary British man, like the Gordon Ramsay effect. Right. And then that sort of gained me a bit of traction, and then I started having a pop at the right wing. Effectively, I thought I'll use this effectively.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose from Americans' perspectives, I always feel like when they look at Brits, if you fit into, if you tick a few of the boxes for them, they fucking love you. So if you are a, well-spoken Jacob Rees-Mogg guy with a castle and a butler or something, they would love that. Equally, if you're a sort of, Cockney-sounding dude like you are, I bet they fucking love that too.
Yeah, no, they really do sort of. I think that's how, because it's either the Hugh Grant type or it's like Jason Statham. Really, there's no middle ground for them. So they've sort of flocked to me because I don't pronounce the T in water, I suppose.
Yeah, love it. Well, I'm glad that it's going well for you.
Thank you.
The first big video I saw of yours was the one where you were talking about your cat.
Yeah, it's always the cat one. The thing about I could have probably quite easily coasted on the cat stuff. My cat absolutely despises the fact I exist, will not allow me to pick her up. I could probably be a multimillionaire on a yacht if it weren't for her. So I had to sort of lean in with the heavy political satire. Yeah. Thanks, wherever you are.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of nice. There's a level of sort of not botheredness to your cat, and indeed the video around it, where it's just, I think there's a line on it, isn't there, where you're just look, she doesn't even give a fuck, but still get
if I fell down dead, she'd start with the soft parts. I've always said that about her. She's just this glassy-eyed little goblin that I have a responsibility to feed and water now.
Yeah. Is it true? This is I know you're on to talk about politics, and there's a limit to how much we can talk about cats feasting on humans, but let's explore this for a second. Is it true that cats would eat your face if you died?
I think they'd start with the eyes.
Really?
Probably. I'm just thinking if I was a cat, it's soft, isn't it?
I was hoping you were going to say either a yes or a no. I didn't realize we were going to go graphic about it.
No, yeah, I've done experiments. Apparently I would guess the eyes. I think it's the same with dogs, to be honest. I don't think it's mutually exclusive. So Yeah.
I guess it's like, yeah, if we're really thinking about this, if we're going levels deep, if you take any animal and lock it in a house with its owner, and the owner is no longer alive to feed it, eventually the animal's going to get desperate enough to feast on the eyeballs of its owner.
Pepper is like Jack Nicholson from The Shining on the best of days, let alone like if I drop down brown bread. It's she's having a good week. I think.
Yeah. Okay, let's get on to some of the juicy stuff. I'm interested to hear your thoughts and opinions. I get the sense that we come from a similar place politically, and there's a lot going on at the moment out there. And big story, I suppose, this week is, I mean, aside from the strikes, which obviously we can talk about in a little bit, but I'm really interested in this sort of resurgence of support for Boris Johnson, because I, like a lot of people, sort of assumed that after Partygate and after the Chris Pincher meltdown, when he was ejected from power, I mean, I was happy that day. I thought that was the end of it. Like, let's draw a line under it. And, you know, I'm not a massive Rishi Sunak fan. I'm never going to cheer on a Conservative administration. But it felt like we had turned a corner. Like, maybe this guy's a grown up and we could get back to something resembling measured conservatism and, you know, the natural party of government and fiscal responsibility and all that. Actually, I've missed out Liz Truss, who was in the middle there, sort of, you know, temping.
The fleeting visit, yeah.
But now there's sort of this talk of him going for the leadership again, like beginning a campaign in a similar way to how he did with like when Theresa May was prime minister, sort of, you know, like hollering, heckling from the back. What's your thoughts on that?
Is ever so impressive is the sort of British public's. It's like Game of Thrones syndrome. When they announced that House of the Dragon, no one wanted to know, and then it started airing, and it got record and it's like after what they did with the end of that series, they're still going to It's frightening, and I realised that it was going to happen because my mum votes Conservative.
Right.
I will never know why. She is from Hackney. We have been poor our whole lives, but my dad used to vote Conservative because he hated Tony Blair, so she just does what he did.
Right.
And I remember ringing her and being like, "Oh, Boris Johnson potentially, you know, back as prime minister." And she was like, "Oh yeah, I've missed him, and he got funny hair." And I'm like, "That's what we're fucking." I think it's you know, frowned upon in society to like dig your own mum in the head, but it's just so frustrating, and I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, he ended up back in. It's going to kill me, but it makes me want to dive off a multi-story car park. But yeah,
I remember thinking a while back, I was like, literally the worst thing that could happen for UK politics is that Boris Johnson becomes prime minister again. So obviously that is what is going to happen. Like, I'm at the end of my tether now where I'm like, yeah, I mean, I didn't want Brexit to happen, and that fucking happened. I didn't want Donald Trump to become president, and he fucking became president. And we're so far down the trajectory, like the dark timeline, the bad timeline, that I just sort of accept it now. You know,
it's just an episode of Brass Eye these days. It's just unfathomable in the sense that, like, I remember when Partygate happened, everyone was like, "Oh, this is it, he's finished." And then he left, and it was like, "Oh, fucking brilliant." And I was just sitting there, and there was just part of my mind like, they'll forget. They will forget, and all this hatred will just be absorbed. And it's like American sort of personality politics with Trump and things like that, whereas Rishi is very to the bone dry. Yeah. And I think that, like, the average Conservative voter misses a bit of is he going to hide in a fridge? I don't know. So who knows what they want, but I certainly don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think there's a real problem with short-term memory loss or absence of long-term memory. Maybe that's it. But like, I was looking at tweets this morning, and there was something by Nadine Dorries, quite predictably, where she was saying, like, ever since Johnson left, things have got worse and worse. And there's it's not her. There's a load of backbenchers who would love to see him prime minister again, and I'm sure a lot of donors. And
it's suit them.
But it's the complete whitewashing of history that gets me, like, where they really think that, like, looking back on it now, that Johnson resigned and then some poll lead collapsed and Labour like zoomed in the lead. I'm like, no, like all of this started going bad before he stepped down. You know, like it was with Patterson and the second jobs thing, and that 2 weeks where the Daily Mail actually decided to hold the government to account shortly before they ejected their editor from Daily Mail HQ for holding the government to account. But it was that kicked it all off. The poll lead completely collapsed on them. And from there to Partygate to Chris Pincher, it never recovered, and it never has done. But this idea that it's because they got rid of Boris Johnson that they're 25 points behind is fucking fantasy.
Purely, you get rid of Ronald McDonald's, they don't stop making hamburgers. You know, for me, it was always during COVID, which was like, for me personally, it was a really scary time. It was like, well, for most people, but like particularly me, I remember those early days watching the numbers go up. And what did he leave it with? About 180,000 dead.
Yeah.
And then it's like, if they can sort of forego that, they can forgo fucking anything, mate.
Yeah,
absolutely anything. Partygate irrelevant. It doesn't matter what. He could literally like curb stomp a kid on TV. They would fucking vote him in again. It's frightening.
Yeah, they wouldn't just forgive him for curb stomping a kid on TV. They would find it funny, like how he was doing it. Like, oh, isn't it? You know, he didn't have his shirt tucked in, and his hair was a bit fuzzy, and he kept stuttering.
And he's charming. The cunt looks like brushes his hair with a toffee apple. I can't stand looking at the man. It's like he's he's a spitting image puppet, just come to life and walking around and living, and it freaks me out more than anything.
Yeah, what do you think it is about? Like, what is appealing to him? Because I always imagine it's. Well, I don't imagine, I say it quite liberally on sequential episodes of this podcast, that people are just fucking morons. Like, half the country are fucking idiots. But, am I being too brutal on them? Or...
No.
Okay. I was going to try and sort of psychoanalyze it a bit. Like, is it that people are sort of gaslit and, spoon-fed shit by the media who are in bed with the government? Or is it that people are just too busy? Or...
I think people mistake his fucking idiocy for like down to earth type behavior.
Yeah.
And like Adele is down to earth, she isn't fucking calling people who wear burqas, post boxes and things like that. She's not an abhorrent person, but they see something in him that I just don't. And that's what's weird to me, because every single prime minister before him has been this sort of black and white figurehead person that just says words, but he's made it about a personality politics thing like Trump, and that's why I think they're absolutely comparable, because he could go up there and say the most abhorrent shit and they're like, Boris, what you like. It just blows my mind. Like, don't listen to the words.
Do you know what's interesting though is like, and I know a lot of people draw parallels between Trump and Johnson, but I always think like they are very, very similar in their right-wing populism. But the thing that gets me and the thing that upsets me that other people don't notice or maybe they pretend not to notice is the utter contempt that these two individuals treat their own voters who worship them. So with Johnson, maybe I would be able to afford him a level of respect if he spent loads of time up in, say, the Red Wall and hung out with loads of like former Labour voters, ex-miners, and really, if he was pictured getting to know these people and, being he's never going to be salt of the earth because of his background. But if he actually showed some interest or wanted to rub shoulders with regular working people, you could make a case then that like, okay, he's not a man of the people, but he's kind of, he's obviously interested. And it's exactly the same with Trump. Like all these people in fucking checkered shirts, plaid shirts with, double shotguns, sitting on their porches, cowboy hats, but like cheering him on. He would never be seen dead with them. Like he would chuck them out of his fucking golf clubs,
Yeah, it's, I don't know. It's, for example, I think Rishi Sunak recently went to a soup kitchen and asked a homeless man if he's in business. It's that kind of sort of dumbfound, like they're so fucking thick, and that's what bothers me. And they're not equipped for the fucking job. What was it? He fucking like COVID first starts. He's like, I'm shaking hands with COVID patients, and bang, he comes up with COVID, and he nearly went belly up.
Yeah.
What can you do? You can't have it all. And
Yeah.
it's just, the inadequacy, and it just clearly doesn't take it seriously. He wasn't showing up to Cobra meetings, and it's like, I just like someone that actually sort of gives a fuck. Same as Rishi. The bloke's just, this is like a hobby to him. He doesn't need any money. He doesn't need any sort of, doesn't need any achievements or anything. He's fucking won the game. I don't understand what he's doing in fucking politics. He hasn't got a clue. And it's the same with Johnson. Well, for Johnson, it probably was a legacy thing, but
that's a big question, isn't it? Because it's, and I always think there's something in, like, there's an overlap there with ownership, proprietary of, let's say, the Sun, which loses money, and yet Rupert Murdoch holds on to it every year. It is supplemented by the profit that he makes from Fox News in the States. That's how the Sun is still operational.
He's categorically to blame for the state of the UK now. I can't. He's the worst out of all of them, I think. Talks that shell, that bloke.
Yes, I agree. But he won't be around for much longer, so that's good.
He'll find a way to live forever, won't he? They do that, the fucking cockroaches.
Do you think he'll cryogenically freeze his brain?
Yeah, I think it'll be like Futurama. He's a head in a jar, still just running all these conglomerates and fucking everyone's lives up.
I would say, like, maybe he'll chill out because it's, he's later in life and everything, but he's just got divorced from Jerry Hall, hasn't he? So he'll probably go on like an angry Lawrence Fox kind of Elon Musk tip now. But
pull a full Jordan Peterson.
But the point I was going to get to was, so the ownership of the Sun, like, it's loss making, and yet it is, he still keeps hold of it, right? And you can say he keeps hold of it because of pride or, sentimentality. I don't think that's the case. I think he keeps hold of it because it is hugely influential, and he wants he wants to control politics, basically, and geopolitics. And I think in a similar way, Sunak, as you've just sort of alluded to, he doesn't need to be prime minister. He has literally hundreds of millions of pounds in the bank, which leaves this question, like, if Rupert Murdoch retains ownership of the Sun for sort of power and influence, then what the fuck is Rishi Sunak doing in number 10? Like, what exact, like, whose puppet is he? What is he trying to achieve? There's just a big question mark over all of that for me.
Like an ego thing, I think. That and obviously, like, his wife as well. How much money she got? At least a couple of quid, something like that. And
I think it is,
just stopping the tax on those kinds of things. I figure if you have that sock puppet in there, you can alleviate, well, keep a lot of money where you want it. I mean, for example, if Labour, one of Labour's main things is basically up the fucking tax on, billionaires, companies, windfalls, those kinds of things. So I feel like that's why he's there. That, and partly because he can be, purely because he can be.
I wonder if, is it like sort of conditioning? Is it like he went to Eton? No, he didn't go to Eton. He went to Winchester, sorry. But it, similar sort of vibe. These people are conditioned and raised and challenged with questions as though they were the prime minister. They're like 13-year-old boys, and teachers are saying shit like, imagine you are the prime minister and you have to justify this scenario to this group of people. How would you word that? Like, and they're prepped. They're just groomed and radicalized. And I guess you could make a case then that, he's come up that route, that trajectory, and it just feels like
it makes sense for him to be there, I guess.
Yeah.
But then in that same breath, like, Eton is the place that produces, I think it's produced the majority of them, isn't it? Including Boris, who is, I feel like, if I was a teacher at Eton, which is, an institution held in a high regard for whatever reason, whether you agree or not, that man's a fucking moron and seems to have learned nothing.
Yeah.
He can't conduct himself in a social situation, let alone in front of, like, on the world stage. I feel like he was just in detention constantly or something. I don't know. Waste of time.
I think he's coasted by on classism and brainwashing, like, across the UK, where we are raised to believe. I mean, we're talking about conditioning and people being raised a certain way, but I think for a lot of us, we're raised to think that somebody like Boris Johnson, who speaks a certain way, who wears probably quite an expensive suit, albeit badly, that he is therefore smart, right? Like it's this.
That's the assumption, isn't it? You get private education, you're expected to do great things, and on paper, he has done a great thing, I guess, for the school, but so badly, like so monumentally badly.
Yeah, but it's also a sort of testament to the fallibility or the poor service that you can expect despite shelling out like 20 grand a year for private school fees.
Absolutely,
and like
yeah.
pulling every string in the book to try and get your kid into Oxford or whatever. That this is a guy who has not come out particularly well educated, and pretty much, I hope I'm not libeling or slandering myself here, but I don't think he's had a job in his working life where he hasn't sort of, cheated or severely bent the rules.
Where he hasn't cheated.
Yeah, well, that too. Yeah, I mean, it's like we've all sort of gone over the myriad of misgivings that he's exhibited across his relationships and his working life. I don't suppose we'll be adding much to the conversation by continuing that. You talked a minute ago about one of Labour's policies. If they got into power, I think another one was to close the loopholes on non-dom tax status. Let's talk for a minute about what a Labour government might look like, because every day, like, it kind of makes me smile. It's a dark world out there. This show is called Aid Thompson and Other Disappointments. It's somewhat dystopian. It can be a bit of a downer, a bit of a bummer, but occasionally I look at the polls and Labour are comfortably in the lead. And it gets me thinking, what might life be like under a Starmer-led government, whether it's Labour majority or a coalition? And on a good day, I think, wow, it's going to be this sort of, liberal gallivant around, proportional representation, and we'll do this, and then that'll get better, and we'll rejoin the single market. And then other days I'm like, none of that is going to happen, Aid. They're just going to...
Politics.
Yeah, they're going to win a majority, and then they're going to be like, yeah, now it's our turn. And they're just going to do whatever the fuck they like and renege on all the stuff, the idealistic stuff that maybe you and I would be fantasizing about. What do you think it's going to be like if Starmer wins?
I don't think it's going to be like Woodstock. I don't think the whole world's going to change. We're all going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, that kind of thing. Starmer's a grey area for me. So I don't know. Their manifesto, I like. I'd like to put more money back into policing, NHS, schools. Teaching, that kind of thing. And I firmly believe those would be things that would happen. But I do think it's going to be very much. You won't notice overnight. I don't think it's well. Obviously, we had 13 years of Conservatives, 11, 12. I think it's something that's going to take over a decade. I'd love to see Brexit get reversed. That's never going to happen either. But I don't know. I just think it'd be nice to have people on the media outlets that sound concise, intelligent, and maybe a bit more, not sympathetic, that's the wrong word, maybe a bit more relatable. Like I always get videos of, oh, blimey, what's her name? I absolutely adore her. Zara Sultana.
Oh, yeah.
I think she's absolutely phenomenal. I honestly would love to have her as PM tomorrow. I think if she was in charge, I'd be like, yep, it's all going to happen overnight. It's going to be rainbows and sunshine. It's going to be great. But I think to be realistic, it's just the process is going to take a long time, assuming that Labour do get in. Yeah.
I mean, that's the assumption, isn't it? Like I was listening to somebody yesterday on LBC or wherever, and they were saying, like, at the moment, it seems like a comfortable lead. 25 points, pretty good. Odds on Labour government. But they sort of tapped into something, I think, did I talk to Tan or some? I can't remember who the fuck the guest was now. It was 2 or 3 months ago. I was like, my great fear is that once the machinery of Tory donors, campaign spending, funneling money to, sort of sister companies, and like in the same way that I think Vote Leave there was some sort of relationship with Vote Leave, and then Darren Grimes's Believe, that like they'll just funnel money out in weird and wonderful creative ways, and they'll just outspend Labour on the political campaigning. Plus they'll have the strength of like the 2 best-selling tabloids in the country, the Mail and the Sun, And I feel like I can't take anything for granted at this stage. Like once that machinery fucking kicks in, that poll lead, like Labour might still inch it, but I think the poll lead will come down substantially. I don't think they'll be walking away with some barnstorming majority.
No, it'll be that or a coalition government, which, is better than nothing. But when is the next election? 2025?
I don't think it'd be that far away. I think it's... So it could be this year still, but I think it'll be next year.
I have no concept of time anymore. Everything's so fucking awful. But that's the problem. They've got time to recuperate, and like going back to what we were saying earlier about Boris Johnson and the way that attitudes have very quickly shifted. It's like, hang on a fucking minute. Yeah. Like this has gone right the other way already. Like I wouldn't want to give them a week, let alone a year, to recoup their losses on this. And what you said with the spending. I also think a factor, this is probably going to get me fucking like chastised for saying it, is like obviously where the older generation are slowly, well not so fucking slowly with COVID dropping off.
Yeah,
that knocks out a large amount of their demographic. I don't know what it'll look like in 20 years, say when we're older and we're sort of considered the fucking woke lefty OAP types, and it just. Yeah, it's a weird landscape, and I feel like it is going to shift in our favour, but I don't think it's going to be, as you said, this giant fucking bar graph. It's going to be minuscule.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. That's an interesting thing to touch on. Actually, is the changing demographics of Labour and Tory voters. So traditionally, when people get to about 37, 40 years old, they start to vote Conservative. That's just a given, like in US and UK politics, and I suspect Australia as well, sort of like anglicised democratic nations. When you get into middle age, you're looking for security. You don't want to rock the boat. You don't want anything too radical.
Of course.
You feel like you've paid in your fair share, I guess. And then you start to row back on some of the more liberal idealistic stuff. That is not happening.
It's not going to happen, no. Like I'm, believe it or not, 29. So by the time I'm like 40, I'm still going to have fuck all. I'm still going to be poor. I'm not going to stack that bread away like my parents and my grandparents' generation, where it's like, I think the only reason to really saliently vote Tory is if you own a business or you've got money and land. And I understand those reasons. Fair enough, it suits your needs. But I'm never going to have that, and the majority of this country isn't. So I think it's going to be considerably different in 20 years. I think 37 that's just going to be not a thing anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think the days of people, say, buying a house when they were like, 25, 27, getting married, have a couple of kids, and then they get to like 45 and they've kind of, almost paid off that 20-year mortgage. It's
fucking mental, mate. Like my mum's next door neighbours, like they're an old couple. They're nice. They own 2 properties. For 30, 40 years, he put cones out on the motorway, and she had a part-time job as a receptionist, and they own about 4 cars. And it's like, what the fuck? Like they bought their house for a punnet of raspberries, and it's like I can't even get like looked at for a mortgage. It's a totally different thing. But when you have these conversations with them, it's like, but it was different back then. I earned £8 a week. It's like, but it's relative. It's totally relative. And I'm so sick of having that fucking conversation, so I won't continue it. But God, it's like pulling teeth.
Yeah, I've done ranty fucking TikToks about that sort of stuff, where it's like, you have this. They're not even boomers. Like my dad is a boomer. It's the boomers plus the next generation after that. Yeah. Which I suppose I'm including myself in, weirdly. But like, I mean, sort of. So my dad is like, I think he's 76. And then it's people sort of about 60 upwards, I think now, where they're like, well, it wasn't easy in our day, but you're talking about, 5%, 6% interest rates at the moment. Back in the day, it wasn't uncommon to have 11% interest rates. So just think about that, Aid. I'm like, yeah, but fucking when it was 11% interest rates, you were buying the house on your salary and it was like 3 times your salary. It wasn't
like a 5-bedroom house for like 3 buttons. Or something like that. Yeah.
Right now it's like 11 times the average UK salary to buy the average priced UK house. It's fucking batshit. And people are like,
people like our generation, like we can hope for is an inheritance, which is a really horrible thing.
But even then, it's
not happening for fucking most of us. Trust and believe. But like, I think if I have a kid, which I do intend to one day, if like the government will allow me, yeah, just like what the fuck, I ain't gonna leave them nothing.
No,
It's
well,
insane.
this is the sad thing is it's like, so for most people now, I think the average age, I'm reeling off stats here, but I promise any listeners, I mean, you should go and Google this stuff because this is just, this is based off like fuck all research, me reading an article like 2 months ago and vaguely recalling it. But I'm sure I read that the average age for like first time buyers now is something like 38. It's not like we're so far beyond this idea of you go to school, you go to college, you go to university, then you get a good job. Then you go to the bank and you explain to them how much your salary is. And the nice man in the bank says, yep, rubber stamp, boom, go and buy your first place. You meet your sweetheart, then you have a baby and then you scale up and like all of that shit is out the window. Like people are, and then right, here's the weird thing is then people are like, why have we got such a labor shortage? Why have we got, such an aging population? Who's going to look after the aging population? I'm like, because nobody's fucking having any kids because it's too expensive.
Yeah, I think people are living too long as well. Controversial, but I genuinely do think that it always bothers me when I'm walking around a supermarket and there's like a bloke, this is 70 plus stacked on his shelf. It's like, that man should be fucking retired, first of all, but that's not going to happen either. And one of my favorite, I assume you use Reddit. One of my favorite subreddits is anti-work, and it seems to be mostly populated by the generation under me. And these kids don't give a fuck, and I love them so much. They're like, I don't like this job, I'm leaving. And they're like, oh, but what about you? And that, fuck you, I'm leaving.
Yeah,
good. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Don't want to work. Don't find something that suits you and makes you fucking happy. I like that kind of thing. But that is another factor that will obviously interrupt the process that you just described. Because I think people are just fucking sick to the back teeth of it.
I think so, and I think it will. You can push your luck so far for so long, but eventually that pendulum will swing the other way. And I think young people today, or these kids today that I've spoken to, that I've interacted with, they tend to be a lot more entrepreneurial, a lot more sort of what's the word? Sort of locked into their own goals and things that they want to achieve than I think any other generation has ever been before. So now, so back in the day, like when I was like 15, 16, I was like, I'm going to be in a band. And, I hope that a record company will be interested. I hope that this middleman sort of function here will sign us and then will, invest some of their money to then make. Nowadays, it's like, I'm going to start a band, but we're going to record all of our own stuff in my bedroom studio, put it out ourselves on Spotify. Yeah. And they do all the shit themselves. They're so liberated by technology and possibility.
It's funny because I feel like a sort of I've been sort of missed out a bit because I was born in 93, so the start of the internet, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the world is my oyster in theory. So before me, you had this generation of men and women that are very good with their hands. Like my dad was phenomenal. Like if the car broke, he'd fucking go and Google the part, fix it himself. I'm useless. I can't do any of that. But then the generation underneath me, by the age of 12, they can code a program. And I'm just sort of in the middle, like, oh fuck, I've done it. Like I don't know anything. I'm useless. But the kids, they're so put together online. I think it's a good thing and a bad thing that they're pursuing these interests. That I think the internet is precisely the reason why, is the wealth of information. They're by the age of 14, they've got stock portfolios and fucking crypto. I don't have a clue, mate. I really don't understand what's happening. But good on them. I hope it works out. Don't fuck your life up on it. I suppose.
I mean, it's like. I will just say this, like it doesn't take, well, do I want to say this? I'm just going to say it and then I'll row back if I feel like I regret it. Standard. I feel like it's not that hard to learn to code now with the resources that there are. I feel
absolutely.
There's
YouTube tutorials, man.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I'm self-taught. Like I just, like having a kid helped a lot because it just like lit this fire of, immediacy under my arse. I was like, fuck, like I really have to get my shit together, like partly for the future of my kid and now kids, but mostly because when you have a kid, your girlfriend or wife's income is very likely to fucking just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And if you harbor any aspiration to return to the level of financial freedom you had before the kid came along, then you have to work your fucking ass off and like double your salary, basically. So I was like, right, I can do this. I could just, if I just get up at 4 a.m. and learn and build stuff and like write these tests and do that, like, so that helped a lot. But I think, you know, with the right motivation, I think anyone, any age could start doing coding tutorials and probably get hired.
I've literally just started doing it on YouTube. I'm learning Python, Java, and CSS just because, like, I was like, well, why the fuck aren't I? Because this stuff's all free and totally accessible now. It's not like I have to go somewhere and do it. I don't have to buy a book. It's literally just some dude on YouTube out of the goodness of his heart is like, I'm going to show you how to code, you fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, wicked. And they're good. It's really impressive what you can learn from YouTube.
It is. I mean, like, everyone thinks YouTube, well, not everyone, but a few people, a healthy chunk of people think that YouTube is just pretty American teenagers speaking in slang or whatever, or trying to sell merchandise. YouTube is fucking invaluable. Like, you can learn, like, edit. Like, I've done woodwork tutorials and built very questionable structures with like little shit tree houses for birds and stuff in my garden. But like, but you can learn, like, yeah, I've done woodwork and coding and like loads of shit on there. It's
languages, anything. It's totally bizarre. Like when YouTube first started, I remember it was a star rating system, and the video limit was 10 minutes.
Yeah, and
then like overnight now, it's like this. It's so fucking useful, and I'm so glad that kids are actually taking care of it. So I haven't got any siblings or anything. My parents had me and were like, oh, we can't top that, so we'll just leave it as it is. But I've got younger cousins who are like, one of them is really put together, exactly what we described. The other one is like, let me show you this Fortnite skin. And I'm like, oh, never mind, mate. It'll get better, you know?
Yeah.
But it's just, just watching these kids that are like 15 years my junior be so much more clued up on something that when I was younger, I was the impressive one.
Right.
Like, I was like, oh, I'll show you how to do this on the internet. I'll book you a holiday. And they're like, oh, isn't he amazing? And now I'm like base level at best.
No, man, like, just honestly stick at it. Like, if you're doing, so I started off with like proper base level, borderline humiliating, like sort of, you know, like 7-year-old
coding
kid,
for that.
Like, yeah, like if you drag this bubble of code into this bubble of code, it'll do this. Like, it was really, you know.
That's what you need, though, for anything. It's fantastic.
Yeah, but it's like you get there and you slowly get that sort of endorphin rush of like fixing problems and seeing things come to life, and it can, like, you know, I don't want to get too life coachy about it, but it can. I went from like sort of dead end recruitment jobs and like a project admin position to like tripling my salary. So it's like, you know, without trying to sound like a massive twat about it, it's like it can change your life. It can put you on the property ladder. It can send you on the holidays that you wanted, and it's not like, it doesn't fall into that weird Ponzi, like, come and trade crypto and you could make serious money. Like, it's just, you know, teach yourself a skill and get. But then the other thing is like just going back to what you were saying about, like, you know, learning things on YouTube and so on. Like, I don't think people really have an understanding of how revolutionary it is, in the sense that, you know, America is already in this like education fee hellhole. The UK is kind of, you know, apparently aspirationally following it down that hellhole. I mean, I don't really see any particular benefit to paying like 30 grand. I mean, like, tuition fees I think are about to double again. So why the fuck would you pay 30 grand to go to university when you could just start learning coding, and within like not even 3 years, like probably 2 years, you could get a job as a junior developer. Like, it's and
then work up. Yeah, no, I went to university. I have a bachelor's. I've never done anything with it because I'm probably a moron, and because there's no real market for my job. But I remember sitting there about a year into university, and the lecturers didn't really give a shit. It was all PowerPoints, and I'm like, this cost me an arm and a leg. What the fuck am I doing here? But it got to that point where it's like, I've got to see it through to the end. And honestly, it's my biggest regret going to university. And I know that's like, but I wish that I'd done something similar, learned I don't know, a trade, fucking anything, and worked my way up. I genuinely think that's because university isn't for everyone. They tried to sell it in the last 10 years, like, oh, if you don't go to uni, you're fucked. It's over. You're a moron. And it's like, that's why I went, and I sort of got frightened into it, and regret it truly. But I've ended up, because of university, I live where I live, and my life's here now, so I'm grateful for that. But other than that, fuck that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's. I don't want to be too, disparaging about the whole university experience, because clearly for a lot of kids, the idea of leaving home for the first time, getting independence, partying, freshest balls, getting fucked in the back of the fucking I don't, I don't know how to finish that sentence and still come off.
Getting fucked in the back of a bumper car, I don't know. So.
Yeah. But yes, all I'm saying is there's a certain lifestyle that comes with university, and it can be quite enjoyable for some people. But then I always say, like, I would just, if I had my way, and I don't want to be too controlling of, my children's futures or whatever, but I will egg on my son to just learn to code and then contract and then move to wherever his friends are going to university and live in their house share. But whilst they're all like plummeting into a lifetime of debt, he's fucking
while their mental health is spiraling,
accumulating wealth. Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I feel like if I ever had a kid, I would never try and influence them, but I would cross my fingers that they take that road genuinely.
Yeah.
For the standard, for the amount you pay for the standard of education, I do think it is appalling personally. And I went to University of Kent, which at the time was, I think it was like top 10, top 5 maybe. And I was just sort of sitting there like, this is it. Like, fuck me. I thought it was a bit like, Indiana Jones lecture hall type thing. And it's like a fucking weird room.
Well, the University of Kent was designed by an architect who designed prisons, right?
Yeah, you can tell as well. It's like fucking scum in there. It's awful.
Yeah. So my first girlfriend, she went to University of Kent, and I drove up there to see her. And yeah, it looks like somewhere that you send, like it's jailing kids. Like
there's a Honduran prison. My mate went there, and his accommodation, it was like a corridor with 8 rooms. The rooms were decent, but then in the middle of these 8 rooms was a small room, probably like 10 by 10 feet, and it had a under the counter fridge between the 8 of them and a fucking microwave. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening? This is insane. And we're paying $9,000 a fucking year.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Still, at least you didn't pay that $9,000 a year when COVID was on to just watch fucking like
breaks
Zoom.
My heart, honestly, truly. It really does. And well, maybe that's something that I'd like to see with, if Labour were to get in. I do think there would be more funneling into education rather than, offshore tax havens. So fingers crossed, maybe the standard of living will increase. So it's not, like a fucking episode of Porridge that they're living in or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the future. So let's assume that Labour get in. That seems, the bookie's favourite in terms of likely outcomes. If the
events, down Ladbroke, stick a bet on.
Yeah, you should do. You probably win. I mean,
yeah.
But if the events of today and indeed the polls of today take us through into tomorrow and next month and 6 months or whenever they call or are forced to call the next general election, if Labour win, at some point the UK is going to be forced to reconcile or come to terms with the last decade of neglect, corruption, lies, a tanking of confidence and trust in our politicians, depletion on the world stage. The list is endless of what's gone wrong in the last 10 years. Yeah. We talked a little bit earlier about, gaslighting and people being morons and cheering on Boris to come back again. How long do you think it's going to take until Britain is ready to accept the repercussions and the reality of the last decade?
I honestly think it's happening now. I think this is the very start. Ever since, the energy prices went up and people are fucking freezing and can't afford and mortgages are going up, etc. So, for example, when I'm in the pub, and there's these old boys over 50 who are usually diehard conservatives, you will hear this phrase more, the last time I vote Tory again. And it's like, I'm hearing that more and more, which I think is fucking brilliant. Love that. Buy him a pint. We've finally seen sense. but I do think it's begun. I think people have completely lost faith in Brexit finally. I've got relatives that are expats that voted Brexit and are sitting in their fucking villas going, oh, we shouldn't have done that. It's like, yeah, no shit, you shouldn't have done that. I do genuinely believe it's begun, and I think it's going to snowball. But that's what worries me about Johnson coming back. It's just like a fucking cultural reset then. It's like, oh, he's back, nothing happened, cool. So I'd like to think it's begun now.
Yeah.
Like,
I guess it's difficult it's difficult for me to get carried away too much with the optimism of that people are coming to terms with it or accepting. I mean, I know that the polls for Brexit have swung quite drastically towards Remain and regret, if you like. But I also think, like, I mean, my faith in Britain and the average UK voter and the average, like, sometimes, right, I've been tempted to just take my phone out, right, and film people that I think look like fucking idiots, right? And then,
well, yeah, I agree though.
And do a TikTok and just be like, the problem isn't like messaging. The problem isn't like getting the facts or the stats or graphs out there to show how much money they funneled out to all of their mates, or, you know, why 200,000 people had to die in COVID, or, you know, this shit or that scandal. The problem isn't any of that. The problem is people like this fucking idiot get a say. Yeah. And his mates are all like, yeah, just vote Brexit party, or like, then they all of their family have always voted Tory. That's a big thing, like tradition. It's trying to win over people like that who are so rooted in political identity.
I know.
And the fear of feeling stupid maybe is like, oh, if I say that I'll vote Labour this time, that means I'm stupid for voting. Yeah,
you've hit the nail on the head there. Fear of feeling stupid. You can never underestimate British stubbornness. Like, people take the piss out of the Americans for this sort of pig-headedness. We are fucking match level with them. I always respect people that, like if I overhear somebody say like, oh, well, I'm definitely voting Labour this election, I'm like, good for you, mate. And then I rub their nose in it for the next half hour, like, you fucking idiot cunt. And then we celebrate them. But the fear of being wrong is so inherent. Like, they will double down on anything, like the 180,000 dead. As soon as you mention a stat or something Boris did, or something they've done in the last 13 years, it's always that fucking sentence, and it brings my piss to a boil. Yeah, if it was under Corbyn, it's like, oh, you fucking, I can't stand it. But it's that same thing. It's they create these hypothetical situations where, yeah, it would have been worse if it was them. Yeah, it would have been worse. It's like, you don't know that, and you never will.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing also, isn't it? It's this sort of I want to say false equivalence, but it's not really. It's like, false equivalence.
Like fan fiction. It's mental.
Yeah, it's like, so a great example of that was in the run up to the 2019 election, I think it was. Or was it the one before that? Where the guy wrote the piece in the Mail on Sunday about what the first 40 days of a Corbyn premiership would be like. And it was like fucking London burning down in the background, and the pound has crashed, and
Big Ben erupts, fighting in the streets. Yeah.
And the irony now, of course, is that, since then we've had a Boris Johnson premiership, we've had a Liz Truss premiership, and, she and Kwarteng slipped on a banana peel and blew that hole in the economy. And, a lot of the stuff that they were fretting about, the Conservatives have
literally done.
Yeah. Like, things are as bad now as they were scaremongering that they might be under a Corbyn leadership. And look, I don't think Corbyn is without his faults. I don't think he's I don't celebrate him as a sort of messiah figure. I think he would have been better than a Tory government by a long shot. But then I also think, like, now whenever I hear like emphatic frothing Corbyn fans, and they are fans, I'm just like, I get it. I understand. People were wrong. They should have voted Labour, but we fucking have to move on, man. We really do.
You're doing my fucking nutting. Yeah, they're just as bad. Absolutely.
Sorry, I just took a massive swig of beer there. and left.
I'm
left
jealous.
us with
I'm
some.
doing dry January. I want
Are
to
you?
throw myself out the fucking window. I don't know
Yeah.
why I'm doing it. I did it last year. It's the shittest month.
It's a terrible decision. I mean,
It's shocking, isn't it? I think I'm going for one tomorrow. I'm going out. Why not?
yeah. I mean,
End up like Skyping you at 3 a.m.
you've done all right. It's 13 days in.
Yeah, that's enough, isn't it?
I got fucking smashed on a podcast with John Left of the Countryside, another TikToker. And so we did the podcast. Then we stayed online for an hour or two afterwards, just getting fucking hammered. And then, but it was the day before New Year's.
Right.
And so then I woke up on New Year's Eve, hanging out my arse like hemorrhoids, just a real state. And so then I didn't get pissed on New Year's Eve. And then New Year's Day, I was like, maybe this is a new me. You know, I feel fresh. Everyone else is hungover. Should I give up booze for January?
Lie to yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was like, but by the time I got to the next episode of the podcast, I was like, yeah, I'm going to need a fucking beer for this. Yeah.
Understandable. I mean, things are dire. You need a drink to cope at this point. And then the pubs are fucking shutting down as well, practically.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that scares me. I come from a pub background. I used to manage pubs for various different breweries, and I've still got friends that are in the industry. And they told me just before Christmas, like their particular provider was Heineken. And to most people, they'd be like, oh, so the Heineken own most fucking beers and things like that.
Yeah.
They're going to average a price increase of about 50p on the pint.
Right.
And it's like...
I'm surprised it's only that, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. But that's the sort of thing, because obviously drinking at home has always been cheaper. The supermarkets don't pay the tax on the alcohol. And I worry about the loss of pubs, not because I'm a pisshead, because I am a pisshead, but just because they are community spaces. I think they're important.
Yeah.
I get my little bit in now. I do genuinely. They are important to the British public. And I feel like if we lose them, we've lost a significant amount of the battleground, because that's where a lot of the debate happens. I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So support your local pubs if you can afford it. I know it's like 500 quid a pint now, but fuck breweries.
Yeah. I mean, I like part of fatherhood is sort of coming to terms or mourning, if you will, the loss of sort of pub life and having that, like round table discussion with people. And
how long have you got until your kids are 18?
Oh, fucking hell. My son is 6, so I'm...
12 years?
I'm in for a stretch, yeah.
Say 2035, yeah, I'll take him with you.
Yeah. I am looking forward to that. And, like, it's... like we go to the pub still. We have a meal and I'll have a Guinness with it and stuff, but it's not the same as going there with your mates, talking shit, and, and then grabbing a kebab on the way home. But
yeah, regretting every single minute of it. It's fantastic. It's the British way.
It is. And you know what? It's really nice. Like this is something that doesn't really get discussed much, or I don't think I've heard anyone observe this before, but it's a thing that stays with you through the rites of passage, right, in Britain. Because when you're a teenager, you go to the pub with a fake ID, you get a few beers, and great. You know, some mischief, your friend gets too drunk, you puke in the taxi on the way home. Great. Then in your 20s, it's a really social thing. You know, you go to the pub after, it's Thursday night social from your sales job or whatever. And then Friday night, you're out with your mates. Saturday, maybe date night or so. And then when you're in your 30s, it's like, you go for a pub lunch with your like it's still the pub. And then when you're in like your 40s and 50s, it's like a chilled thing. Like it's a whole different thing. You just park up at the bar. You're all relaxed, just no fucks given. You don't care if the barmaid fancies you anymore. You don't.
No, there's no pressure at that point. There's no impressing anybody, no peacocking, nothing.
Yeah, you just talk shit with the other regulars and stuff,
Yeah, we had this weird one in one of the old pubs I used to run, is exactly what you've described. And then at the arse end of the spectrum, there was a man called Jeff. I'll never forget him. He came in. This sounds quite dark. He got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It was very sad, but he loved the pub so much. It was so important to him that he wanted to have the wake there, because that's where all his friends were. And I think that's a wonderful thing. That's why I think they're important. 6 weeks later, Jeff comes in, and he's got the all clear, and he's fucking fuming that he spent all the money on the food. I fucking love it. God bless. It does worry me. It really does, losing those things. I know it does sound trivial, but they are really important things for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So... yeah.
I mean, it's sort of, I don't want to get crass about it, but it's sort of replaced maybe I'm over egging it, but it's kind of replaced the church in some respects, right?
Definitely in this country.
Right, you've got your village where, like, you know, traditionally everyone lives in the village, and then every Sunday they would go to the church and they all shake hands, kiss each other on the cheek or whatever, listen to a psalm or, you know, fucking parable, whatever. And then they all leave, but everyone's met each other, everyone knows everyone in the village. And for a long time, the pub was that. It's like religion sort of fell away a bit, but there was always the pub in your town or in your
pub has always been there. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I agree. I think losing that, seeing pubs shuttered and turned into, so like one of our local pubs has been refurbed. It's a co-op now, and I'm just like, there's something really fucking sad about that, man.
Depressing, mate. Yeah, but it's not even that. If things get worse, we will lose the pubs. We will still have pubs. The only problem being is they will be fucking Weatherspoons.
Yeah,
and they are voids. They are void of atmosphere. They're the McDonald's of pubs, and it's not what it's Labour manifesto. We need to get rid of fucking Weatherspoons.
Yeah.
It frightens the fuck out of me, mate. Because especially particularly where I live, very historic town. One of the pubs was built in the 1300s, things like that. And it's like, so you shut that building down. What the fuck are you going to do with it?
Yeah,
it's important. I think I really do.
Yeah,
it worries me.
Yeah. Well, you're preaching to the choir here.
Yeah.
I mean, if I didn't have kids, and believe me, sometimes on nights when I do have kids and they're just being very quiet, I'm very tempted to go out and support my local pub. But
if you lock the door,
yeah,
you're fine.
I could leave them. Is it illegal to leave them in the car locked while I go in the pub for a bit? Is that?
It wouldn't be under a Labour government, I tell you.
Yeah. We'll put that in the manifesto too.
Yeah.
Young Pagoda, thank you so much for joining me tonight. This has been
really
fun.
Thank you for having me, Aid. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
If you're not following him already, please do go and check him out. You can Google him, actually. I found out earlier. Young Pagoda, TikTok, and you'll be brought straight to his...
Can you Google me?
You can... Yeah.
That's
Googled
gross.
you.
Ugh.
And your videos pop straight the fuck up. So
oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Are you on Twitter or anything? Should I promote you?
I don't do Twitter. I don't understand it. I'm like full boomer about that. Yeah. And I just refuse to support Elon Musk as well at this point.
All I'd say is, if you're not on it, just save yourself the drama, chaos, and hatred. And yeah,
sounds fantastic.
Leave it out of your life. But yeah, so I guess let's go back to promoting you again. So yeah, if you're not following him already, then go and check out Young Pagoda's videos on TikTok. I will be back next Wednesday with a solo show where I'll be ranting, roasting, and raving about whatever is in the news that week. Next Friday, I have a guest pre-booked. Can't remember who the fuck it is because this show is ill-prepared, disorganized, yeah. But do you know what? That is punk politics, guys. It's part of the charm. You wouldn't get this on Newsnight or Question Time, but what you do get is a sort of disheveled, punk politics-y show that's been dragged through the bush backwards, all the while fueled with a couple of IPAs. That's it from me. I'll catch up with you all next week. Thanks very much to the Patreons. Ciao for now. Bye-bye.
Bye.